I want to begin today by asking you to consider something that might seem almost paradoxical at first. We live in an age where we have more dietary information available to us than at any other point in human history, and yet we are more confused about how to eat than perhaps ever before. We know the calorie content of virtually every food we consume. We can track our macronutrients down to the decimal point. We have access to meal plans, diet books, nutrition apps, and fitness coaches at our fingertips. And yet, despite all this knowledge, despite all this technological assistance, millions of people still struggle with the same fundamental challenge. They cannot seem to control their hunger. They cannot seem to lose the excess fat that weighs on their bodies and their minds. And they cannot understand why their willpower seems to evaporate the moment they feel that familiar gnawing emptiness in their stomach. What if I told you that this struggle is not really about willpower at all? What if the entire framework we have built around dieting and fat loss is missing something crucial, something so fundamental to our biology that once you understand it, your entire relationship with food begins to shift? Today I want to explore with you a different way of thinking about hunger, about metabolism, and about the macronutrient that might hold the key to unlocking sustainable fat loss: protein. But I do not want to simply tell you to eat more protein and send you on your way. I want to take you on a journey through the biology, through the evolutionary history, through the thermodynamics and the neuroscience that explain why protein is not just another macronutrient, but rather a metabolic lever that can fundamentally change how your body processes energy and regulates appetite. Let us start with a question that seems simple but opens up into profound complexity. What is hunger? When you feel hungry, what exactly is happening inside your body? Most people would say that hunger is the body's way of telling you that you need energy, that your fuel tank is running low and needs to be refilled. This is the calorie-centric model of hunger that dominates our thinking. We imagine our bodies as simple machines that burn fuel, and when the fuel runs low, a warning light turns on. Eat food, any food, and the warning light should turn off. But anyone who has ever eaten a large meal and still felt unsatisfied an hour later knows that this model is incomplete. There is something else going on, something more sophisticated than a simple fuel gauge. The human body is not just monitoring energy, it is monitoring nutrients. It is monitoring the building blocks it needs to repair tissues, to create enzymes, to build neurotransmitters, to maintain immune function, to regulate hormones. And among all the nutrients your body tracks, there is one that takes absolute priority: nitrogen. Not nitrogen gas from the air, but nitrogen in the form of amino acids, the components that make up protein. Your body cannot manufacture most of these amino acids on its own. They must come from your diet. And without them, you cannot survive. This creates what researchers have called a protein appetite, a biological drive that operates independently of your need for calories. Your brain has a nitrogen counter running in the background, and until that counter reaches a certain threshold, the hunger signal remains active regardless of how many calories you have consumed. This is the foundation of what scientists call the protein leverage hypothesis, a theory that has emerged from decades of research across multiple species, from insects to primates to humans. The hypothesis states something remarkable: that animals regulate their food intake primarily to meet protein requirements, and in doing so, they may overconsume or underconsume total energy depending on the protein density of their diet. Think about what this means in practical terms. If you eat foods that are low in protein but high in carbohydrates and fats, your body will drive you to keep eating, to keep searching for food, because the protein requirement has not been met. You will consume excess calories not because you are gluttonous or weak-willed, but because your biology is searching for nitrogen. You are overeating energy to obtain adequate protein. Now consider the modern food environment through this lens. Over the past several decades, the food industry has engineered products that are incredibly energy-dense but protein-dilute. Processed foods, snack foods, sugary beverages, refined carbohydrates. These products deliver massive amounts of calories with minimal protein content. From the perspective of the protein leverage hypothesis, these foods are almost perfectly designed to trigger overconsumption. Your brain receives the energy, stores it as fat, but the nitrogen counter barely moves. The hunger remains. You eat again. The cycle continues. You blame yourself for lacking discipline, when in reality, you are fighting against millions of years of evolutionary programming that is simply trying to keep you alive by ensuring you get enough amino acids. But the story of protein goes far beyond appetite regulation. There is a thermodynamic dimension to protein metabolism that makes it uniquely powerful for fat loss, and it has to do with the concept of energy efficiency. Not all calories are equal in terms of how much usable energy they provide to your body. When you consume dietary fat, your body can convert it into stored body fat with remarkable efficiency. The metabolic cost is minimal, perhaps 2 or 3% of the calories consumed. Fat is an efficient energy storage molecule precisely because it requires so little energy to process and store. Carbohydrates require a bit more work. Your body must break them down into glucose, manage the insulin response, and shuttle the energy into cells. The metabolic cost here is higher, around 5 to 10%. Protein is different. Protein is metabolically expensive. When you consume protein, your digestive system faces a complex task. Proteins are long chains of amino acids folded into intricate three-dimensional structures and held together by peptide bonds. To extract the amino acids, your body must unfold these structures, cleave the bonds using proteolytic enzymes, absorb the individual amino acids, and then process the nitrogen waste products that result. This entire process requires significant energy. Researchers call this the thermic effect of food, and for protein, it can be as high as 30%. This means that when you eat 100 calories of pure protein, your body may only net 70 usable calories. The other 30 calories are dissipated as heat, burned off simply to process the meal. This is not a trivial effect. Imagine two people consuming the same number of calories, but one gets most of their calories from carbohydrates and fats, while the other gets a significant portion from protein. The person eating more protein is essentially running a higher metabolic rate just through the act of digestion. They are burning more calories at rest, not through exercise, not through willpower, but simply because the food they chose requires more energy to process. This is one of the rare instances where you can increase energy expenditure without increasing physical activity. Your digestive system becomes a furnace, and protein is the fuel that makes it burn hottest. But let us go deeper into the biology, into the hormonal landscape that protein creates inside your body. When you eat a meal, particularly a meal containing carbohydrates, your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin is often called the storage hormone, and this is accurate. Insulin's job is to take the glucose from your bloodstream and shuttle it into cells where it can be used for energy or stored as glycogen or fat. When insulin is elevated, fat burning is largely suppressed. Your body is in storage mode, not burning mode. This is normal and healthy as part of the natural rhythm of eating and fasting. The problem arises when insulin remains chronically elevated due to frequent eating and high carbohydrate intake. Fat stays locked in storage, unable to be mobilized and burned. Protein also stimulates insulin release, but the story does not end there. Protein simultaneously triggers the release of another pancreatic hormone called glucagon. Glucagon is in many ways the opposite of insulin. While insulin promotes storage, glucagon promotes release. It signals the liver to break down glycogen and release glucose into the bloodstream. It signals fat cells to release stored fatty acids so they can be burned for energy. When you eat a high-protein meal, you get both hormones working in a balanced partnership. Insulin helps shuttle the amino acids into muscle tissue for repair and growth, while glucagon keeps the fat-burning pathways open. The result is a much more stable blood sugar level, sustained energy, and continued access to stored fat for fuel. This hormonal balance has profound effects on how you feel after eating. Have you ever noticed that after a high-carbohydrate meal, pasta, bread, rice, you often feel a surge of energy, followed by a crash? You feel tired, foggy, and within an hour or two, you are hungry again. This is the insulin spike and subsequent drop playing out in real time. Compare this to how you feel after a high-protein meal, grilled fish, chicken breast, eggs. The energy is more stable. The mental clarity persists. The hunger does not return as quickly. This is not coincidence. This is the glucagon-insulin balance at work, creating metabolic stability instead of volatility. There is yet another layer to this story, and it involves the gut-brain axis, the communication highway between your digestive system and your brain. When protein reaches your intestines and begins to be digested, specialized cells in your gut lining release signaling molecules called satiety peptides. These include hormones like peptide Y, cholecystokinin, and GLP-1. These molecules travel through your bloodstream to your brain, specifically to regions like the hypothalamus and the brainstem that regulate appetite and energy balance. They deliver a message: nutrients have been received, protein is being absorbed, you can stop eating now. This signaling cascade is far more powerful when protein is consumed compared to carbohydrates or fats. Protein generates a stronger, more sustained satiety signal. Interestingly, this is why pharmaceutical companies have developed weight loss drugs that mimic some of these satiety peptides, particularly GLP-1. These drugs work by artificially amplifying the same signals that your body naturally produces when you eat protein. They are effective, but they also come with side effects and significant cost. What if you could generate these satiety signals naturally, simply by adjusting the composition of your meals? What if the solution was not a medication, but a modification in how you eat? Now I want to shift our perspective slightly and think about timing, about when we consume protein throughout the day. Your body does not have a storage reservoir for amino acids the way it has fat tissue for storing energy or glycogen for storing glucose. Amino acids circulate in your bloodstream for a few hours after a meal, and then they are either used for building and repair, or they are broken down and excreted. This means that unlike fats and carbohydrates, you cannot eat a large amount of protein once a day and expect it to sustain you. Your body needs a relatively constant supply. Yet most people eat in a pattern that completely ignores this biological reality. They eat minimal protein at breakfast, perhaps some cereal or toast. They eat minimal protein at lunch, maybe a sandwich with a small amount of meat. Then they eat a large serving of protein at dinner, thinking they are meeting their needs. The problem with this pattern is something called the leucine threshold. Leucine is one of the essential amino acids, and it plays a critical role in triggering muscle protein synthesis and satiety signaling. Research suggests that you need approximately 2 to 3 grams of leucine in a single meal to maximally stimulate these pathways, which typically translates to about 30 grams of high-quality protein. If you spread your protein too thin across the day, eating small amounts that never reach this threshold, you never fully activate the satiety response. Your brain never receives the clear signal that protein needs have been met. The hunger lingers, the cravings persist. By evening, your willpower is depleted and you overeat. The alternative approach is what I would call front-loading your protein intake. Start your day with a substantial protein-rich meal. 30 to 40 grams of protein at breakfast resets your nitrogen counter immediately. It stabilizes blood sugar from the moment you wake up. It activates those satiety pathways early. Studies have shown that people who eat a high-protein breakfast consume fewer calories throughout the rest of the day without consciously trying to restrict. They simply feel less hungry. The evening snacking diminishes. The cravings for sweets quiet down. You are solving problems that will not arise until 9 or 10 at night by making a different choice at 8 in the morning. This is leverage. This is working with your biology rather than against it. Let me address something that often comes up when people begin to increase their protein intake significantly: the concern about kidney health. This fear has its roots in old research involving people who already had compromised kidney function. For those individuals, restricting protein was indeed medically necessary to prevent further damage. But this finding was then extrapolated inappropriately to healthy populations, creating a myth that persists to this day. Current research is quite clear on this point. In healthy individuals with normal kidney function, high protein intake does not cause kidney damage. In fact, the kidneys are remarkably adaptable organs. When you increase protein intake, your kidneys increase their filtration rate to handle the additional nitrogen waste. This is a normal, healthy adaptation, not a sign of damage. It is similar to how your heart rate increases during exercise. It is working harder, yes, but it is not being harmed. It is adapting. I want to spend a moment reflecting on what this all means from a more philosophical perspective, because I think we often miss the forest for the trees when we talk about nutrition. We get lost in the details of grams and percentages and meal timing, and we forget to step back and ask why we are struggling in the first place. I believe much of our difficulty with food in the modern world stems from a mismatch between our biology and our environment. We evolved in a context where protein was relatively scarce and required significant effort to obtain. Hunting, fishing, trapping, these were not easy tasks. Our brains developed powerful drives to seek out protein because it was the limiting factor for survival. We did not need strong drives to seek out sugar or starch because these were abundant in the environment through fruits, tubers, and other plant sources. Today, the situation has completely inverted. Protein-rich foods are readily available in every grocery store, but they are often more expensive and require more preparation than processed alternatives. Meanwhile, sugar and refined carbohydrates are cheap, abundant, and engineered to be hyper-palatable. We are walking around with Stone Age brains in a modern food environment, and the result is metabolic chaos. Our protein drive is still there, still functioning exactly as it evolved to function, but it is now operating in a context where we can easily consume thousands of calories while barely meeting our protein needs. We eat and eat, searching for satisfaction that never quite comes, because the nutrient our brain is actually seeking is buried under layers of sugar and starch. When you understand this, when you really internalize it, something shifts. You stop blaming yourself. You stop thinking of hunger as a moral failing or a lack of discipline. You recognize it for what it is, a biological signal that is trying to communicate something specific. And once you learn the language of that signal, once you learn to distinguish between genuine protein hunger and the artificial cravings created by blood sugar fluctuations and processed foods, you gain a kind of freedom. You can walk into any situation, any restaurant, any social gathering, and make choices that align with what your body actually needs, rather than constantly fighting against your own biology. The practical application of all this knowledge is actually quite simple, though simple does not always mean easy. It means prioritizing protein at every meal. It means looking at your plate and asking not just how many calories are there, but how much protein am I getting relative to those calories. It means eating your protein first, before the starches and sugars, so that those satiety signals have time to kick in before you overeat. It means distributing your protein throughout the day, rather than loading it all into one meal. It means choosing whole food sources of protein, meats, fish, eggs, dairy, legumes, over highly processed foods that might technically contain protein, but lack the nutrient density and satiety power of whole foods. And here is what I find most beautiful about this approach. It is not about restriction. It is not about cutting out entire food groups or counting every calorie or living in a state of perpetual deprivation. It is about addition. It is about adding in something that your body genuinely needs and allowing that addition to naturally crowd out the things that are not serving you. When you eat enough protein, you find that you naturally eat less junk food, not because you are using heroic willpower, but because you simply do not want it as much. The drive diminishes, the cravings quiet. Your relationship with food begins to normalize. I think this is what we are all searching for, whether we articulate it this way or not. We want to feel at peace with food. We want to feel in control of our bodies without feeling like we are constantly at war with ourselves. We want the fat to come off and stay off without suffering. And I am here to tell you that this is possible, not through some exotic supplement or extreme diet protocol, but through understanding and working with your fundamental biology. Your body is not your enemy. It is not sabotaging you, it is trying to keep you alive and functional using the same mechanisms that kept your ancestors alive for millions of years. When you feed it what it actually needs, when you speak its language, it responds. The hunger calms, the metabolism increases, the fat begins to release, and you rediscover what it feels like to live in a body that feels like home.